What if I told you that the edge of a black hole, that absolute terrifying boundary in the universe, well, what if it doesn't actually exist in physical space?
Right. I mean, that sounds completely counterintuitive, doesn't it? Because we are so biologically wired to look for
Yeah,
borders.
exactly. Like geography has borders, planets have solid surfaces.
So naturally, when we look up at the stars, we look for physical stop signs. We want the universe to be neatly partitioned. And for the last half century, astrophysics gave us the ultimate cosmic stop sign, right? The event horizon.
The black hole's point of no return.
Exactly. A place where gravity is so strong that the universe simply draws a line in the sand and says, nah, no further.
And it's a very comforting binary, honestly, in a grim sort of way. You're either safely in the observable universe or you have crossed the line and you just belong to the void.
Right. But today, well, today we are completely tearing up that map. We are venturing into a conceptual landscape that completely shatters how we define space, time, and, well, you, the observer.
So welcome to this deep dive. Today our mission is to unpack a really definitive, paradigm-shifting framework from Sandeep J. Chavan's 2025 book, Chavan versus Hawking.
And right out of the gate, I think we have to establish the tone of this exploration for everyone listening, because this is absolutely not about tearing down Stephen Hawking.
Oh, not at all.
Quite the opposite. Hawking stands as this unshakable symbol of human will and intellectual resilience and just boundless cosmic curiosity. I mean, he spent his entire life staring into the deepest, darkest pockets of reality.
Using the most advanced math of his era to just pull profound truths out of the void.
Exactly. He brought us right to the precipice of the black hole, using the tools he had at the time, relativity, mathematics, space-time geometry.
But science is a relay race. It's not a static monument. And the premise of Chavan's book is that his new framework, which he calls UED, or Universal Energy Dynamics, it doesn't aim to compete with Hawking's legacy. It really aims to complete it.
Right, to fill in the gaps that those traditional geometry-based models of the universe just kind of, well, left open.
So to do that, Chavan asks us to step out of our normal language, the language of empty space and isolated objects. And he asks us to step into the language of field logic.
Specifically, a framework built entirely around the SVE, the structured vacuum energy field.
Okay, so we need to spend some time defining the SVE, because this is really the bedrock of everything we're discussing today.
Yeah, it's fundamental. When you hear the word vacuum in space, you probably think of a void, right? Like absolute nothingness.
Just a big empty box the planets float around in.
Exactly. And even in standard quantum mechanics, the quantum vacuum is often treated as this bubbling soup of random probabilities, just chaos. But the SVE is entirely different.
Right. It is highly structured.
Highly structured. It is a continuous responsive field of tension and balance. In UED, you are not an object sitting inside an empty container called the universe.
So I'm not just a thing in a box.
No. You, your coffee cup, the planet Earth, the Andromeda Galaxy, all of these are just complex interacting ripples in the SVE.
I love that visual. But I mean, the shift from objects in space to ripples in a field, it might sound like just semantics to some people.
Oh, it's not semantics at all. It fundamentally alters the physical mechanics of everything.
Yeah.
It means there is no true separation between you and the furthest star.
Because we're all part of the same continuous medium.
Right. You are connected by the continuous tension of the field. And this actually brings us to the central thesis of Chavan's intervention. There's a quote that basically serves as the mission statement for this entire deep dive.
Oh, I know the exact one you're talking about. Let me just read it directly to you listening, because it's so powerful. Chavan writes, "The edge of the universe is not where space ends, but where perception pauses."
Let that sink in. The edge is where perception pauses.
It's wild. Imagine standing near the event horizon of a black hole. In the classical framework, your watch hasn't stopped, but the space around you is, like, physically breaking.
But in UED, the field around you is just behaving so radically that the normal rules of observation collapse. The boundary of reality moves from the cold, hard geometry of outer space directly into your own capacity to perceive.
It is a profound pivot. It's like a conversation across eras. Hawking gave us the map of the cosmos, but Chavan is arguing that we fundamentally misunderstood the canvas that the map was drawn on.
We treated space as a geometric surface that bends and warps, but UED treats it as a tension field that delays and aligns.
Which perfectly sets up Act 1 of our deep dive. Because if we're redefining the entire universe as a structured field of ripples, we have to look at the most infamous boundary in astrophysics.
Right, let's talk about the perceptual event horizon.
To really grasp what UED is doing here, we first have to, ground ourselves in the classical model, because everyone has heard of an event horizon.
Yeah, in general relativity, the event horizon is essentially a cosmic prison. It's this one-way mathematical membrane.
Right. The equations dictate that at a certain distance, the Schwarzschild radius, the escape velocity required to pull away from the black hole exactly equals the speed of light.
And since relativity tells us that absolutely nothing can travel faster than light, anything that crosses this threshold is trapped permanently. It is physically walled off from the rest of the universe.
It's the ultimate point of no return. You cross it, you are literally written out of the cosmic story.
The math essentially says light photons are desperately trying to fly outward, but the geometry of space is falling inward faster than the light can travel.
It's like running on a treadmill that is moving backwards at the speed of light. You're just never going to get anywhere.
Exactly. But Chavan completely strips this apart. He says the event horizon does not physically exist as a spatial wall. He calls it a functional misalignment threshold.
A functional misalignment threshold. Okay, so this introduces the most critical mechanism in UETA, which is ATT, alignment threshold time.
Yes. We really need to break down the mechanics of ATT because it changes what the word observation actually means in physics.
Right, because in the classical model, observation is totally passive. Like a photon travels through empty space, hits the retina of your eye, triggers an electrical signal, and boom, you see a star.
It's just a projectile hitting a target.
But in UED, observation is an active phase-locking process. I don't just passively receive light. Light isn't a projectile at all.
No, it's not. Light is a perceptual alignment of ripples between the SVE and your own biological ripple structure.
So when you perceive something, what is actually happening physically is that the ripple in the external SVE has successfully aligned with your internal perceptual receiver.
Right, within a functional time frame. And that time frame is ATT. It is the minimum time required for that external ripple to synchronize with you.
So if the ATT is short, you perceive the event clearly, it's instant. Light, therefore, isn't a particle outrunning gravity. Light is simply the successful synchronization of field tension.
Now, let's apply those mechanics to the black hole. Near a black hole, the SVE isn't curving like a heavy bowling ball on a rubber sheet.
Which is the analogy we've all been taught in school, right?
Exactly. But in UED, the ripple tension in the SVE is just becoming extremely tight, extremely wound up.
So because of this massive tension gradient, the ATT, the time it takes for a ripple originating near the black hole to synchronize with an observer back on Earth, it begins to stretch.
It stretches toward functional infinity. The ripples from inside the black hole do not stop existing. They don't hit a physical wall. They aren't trapped by a magical geometric barrier.
They are propagating through the SVE just like they always do.
Exactly. But because the tension is so extreme, the delay in their alignment with our perceptual machinery becomes infinite. They are delayed beyond our physical ability to decode them.
Wow. So the spatial edge of the black hole is nothing but a perceptual pause.
Right. The mainstream scientific consensus says light cannot escape a black hole. UED asks a much better question. It asks, escape from what and reach whom?
Oh, I love that. The failure isn't that the universe built a cosmic cage. The failure is our inability to stay in tune with that specific frequency of the field.
It completely reframes our relationship to extreme cosmic phenomena. The universe is not broken at the event horizon. Our interpretive apparatus is just too slow to catch the signal.
Okay, let's ground this in a mechanism we can all visualize, because it's a lot of abstract physics. Think about driving your car out of the broadcast range of your favorite radio station.
That's a perfect way to look at it.
Right. As you get further away, the music starts getting staticky. The signal breaks up, the delay and interference increase, and eventually, there's just dead air.
Now, what actually happened there? Did the radio station hit a physical brick wall in the atmosphere?
Did the music cease to exist? No. The signal simply became too misaligned for your car's antenna to successfully resonate with it?
The boundary you crossed wasn't a physical wall in the sky. It was a failure of your receiver, not the transmitter.
That analogy translates so well to the quantum wave functions we are discussing here. The black hole is the distorted field, and we are the car driving away, losing the signal.
Right, and the antenna in this scenario is our macroscopic reality, our telescopes, our eyes, our mathematical detectors.
The information from the black hole is still rippling outward, But the ATT has stretched beyond mechanical limits of our instruments. We just no longer share a language of alignment with that intensely saturated region of the SVE.
It's a beautiful realization, but of course it invites a lot of questions about gravity itself.
Oh, definitely. In fact, I had to push back here because this sounds almost too elegant. If you're telling me a black hole isn't a physical trap, but just a misaligned perception, how do we account for the raw gravitational mass we actively measure?
Right, the actual physical pull.
Exactly. If it's just an illusion of perceptual delay, why does a black hole still have the physical muscle to rip a massive star apart? Misalignment doesn't have mass. Delay doesn't exert force.
That is the exact right challenge to bring up, because it forces us to explain how UED defines gravity.
Okay, lay it on me.
In this framework, gravity is not the bending of an empty space-time continuum. Gravity is the localized density of ripple compression in the SVE.
Localized density.
Yes. The black hole still has immense physical consequence because it is a region where the SVE field is holding an unfathomable amount of structural stress. The tension is very, very real.
And the force required to maintain that tension is what we measure as mass.
Exactly. So when a star wanders too close, it isn't being pulled by a geometric pit in space. It is encountering a catastrophic tension gradient in the field.
The star's own internal ripple structure is just completely overwhelmed by the extreme compression of the SVE around the black hole, and the star is destructured.
So the physical violence is real, but the wall is an illusion. The boundary is an illusion of ATT, but the tension tearing the star apart is the literal physical reality of the SVE reacting to extreme stress.
Which leads to a terrifying question, really. If the event horizon is just a perceptual pause and not a physical boundary, does a black hole even have a real inside?
It's a haunting thought.
If we aren't looking at a hole punched into the fabric of space, what exactly is sitting at the center of all that tension?
That profound question brings us right to Act 2, the death of the singularity.
Wow, the singularity. We all know the classical definition of this. It's the monster hiding in the dark at the center of every black hole.
Yeah, according to Penrose and Hawking's singularity theorems, when a massive star collapses under its own gravity, it doesn't just get smaller and smaller until it's a tight little ball.
Right, it crushes inward infinitely until all its matter occupies a space of literal zero volume.
It's a point of infinite density, a coordinate where the curvature of spacetime becomes infinitely sharp and gravity becomes mathematically unquantifiable.
It is the theoretical limit where general relativity just throws its hands in the air. The known laws of physics completely break down.
It's the universe's ultimate divide by zero error, a place where mass exists without volume.
But Chavan looks at this and points out an uncomfortable truth, a truth that physicists often whisper in the halls but rarely say out loud in press conferences.
Which is that nature does not do infinities.
Never. In mathematics, infinity is a super useful tool.
Yeah.
But in physical reality, an infinity usually just means your theory is wrong.
Or incomplete, at least. Chavan argues that the singularity is not a physical reality. It is a mathematical scar.
A mathematical scar. I love that phrasing.
It is the artifact of pushing equations that were built on continuous geometry way past their valid limits.
It makes sense. If you try to model the ocean using only the mathematics of a perfectly smooth surface, your equations will break down the second a wave crashes.
Right. You haven't discovered a tear in reality, you've just reached the limit of your math.
So if there is no infinitely dense point at the center, destroying the laws of physics and crushing matter out of existence, what actually replaces it?
Well, Chavan introduces a concept called the ripple saturation zone, the RSZ.
The ripple saturation zone.
Yeah.
The RSZ.
The RSZ is the SVE's physical alternative to a mathematical infinity. See, in UED, field continuity is an absolute law. The field can never be torn, and it can never be compressed into zero.
So what happens when a collapsing star exerts unimaginable pressure on the field?
Under extreme tension, matter doesn't compress into nothingness. Instead, it reaches the physical limit of the SVE's capacity to hold geometric structure.
So the form is overwhelmed by the frequency.
Yes. Think of it from a material science perspective. If you apply increasing tensile stress to a steel beam, eventually it reaches its tensile limit.
Right, it yields, it bends or breaks.
It loses its structural integrity and deforms. The SVE operates on a similar, albeit quantum, logic. The field becomes so tightly packed with rippling energy that normal atomic structure can no longer be supported.
Matter just dissolves into non-coherent ripple tension. The particles cease to be particles, but the energy, the stress on the field remains fully intact.
It's conserved. Let's make sure we've got the mechanics of this clear.
Right. It's like if you divide by zero on a chalkboard, you get infinity, and you just have to stop doing math.
Exactly.
But in physical reality, if you keep pouring water into a sponge, the sponge doesn't become infinitely dense and vanish from the universe, sucking all the water out of existence.
No, it simply saturates. It reaches its maximum physical capacity to hold tension, and then the water just pools around it.
The center of a black hole is just a saturated sponge in the SVE.
That is a highly effective way to visualize it. The RSZ is the point of absolute saturation, and this dramatically shifts our entire understanding of black holes.
Because they are no longer cosmic vacuum cleaners erasing mass from the universe.
Right. They're extreme consequence reservoirs. There are zones where the SVE is holding maximum tension.
Essentially storing the energy of collapsed stars in a state of pure structural stress, just waiting for the ambient conditions to allow that tension to redistribute.
Okay, wait. I need to fully unpack the implications of this, because if the center of a black hole isn't a point of infinite destruction, but rather a supersaturated reservoir of ripple tension, that means black holes are actually completely full instead of completely empty.
Oh, wow. Yes. They aren't holes at all.
They are cosmic pressure cookers, tightly holding on to the memory of everything that created them. They are the ultimate physical archives of stress.
Which perfectly bridges us into Act 3. Because if the black hole is a reservoir holding on to the tension of everything that fell into it, rather than an eraser that deletes the universe, we have to talk about the information paradox.
Oh, the information paradox. This was Stephen Hawking's most terrifying realization, and it sparked a literal war in the physics community.
Right. Leonard Susskind, Gerard Tahouf, John Preskill, they all fought over this for decades.
In the 1970s, Hawking proved, using a combination of quantum mechanics and relativity, that black holes aren't entirely black. They emit a very faint thermal energy, which we now call Hawking radiation.
And because they emit energy, they must be slowly losing mass. Therefore, over immense trillion-year periods, black holes will eventually evaporate and disappear completely.
But that creates a massive crisis for physics, because if the black hole evaporates, what happens to all the quantum information of the stuff that fell into it over billions of years?
If the radiation coming out is purely thermal and random, like ash coming out of a fire, then the information about the original matter is erased forever.
And erasing information breaks a foundational pillar of quantum mechanics, the principle of unitarity.
Unitarity, which basically states that the universe must preserve the probability of all events.
Right. You should always be able to run the film of the universe backwards and reconstruct the past. If black holes destroy information, the bedrock of quantum physics just crumbles.
Science has spent 50 years doing theoretical gymnastics to save this information. We came up with holographic principles, firewalls, entanglement bridges, all to avoid the horrifying idea that the universe deletes its own history.
But Chavan offers a completely different, beautifully mechanical solution. He says the paradox only exists because we are treating information as a physical object that can be dropped into a geometric hole.
But in UED, information isn't a thing. Information is ripple memory embedded directly into the fabric of the SVE.
This is a crucial ontological shift. We are conditioned to think of information as being stored inside containers, ink on a piece of paper, electrons in a hard drive.
But UED asserts that information is a relational imprint. It is the specific phase and frequency of tension in the field.
Exactly. When an object, say a whole spaceship, falls into the ripple saturation zone of a black hole, its macroscopic physical form is destructured by the extreme tension.
The steel, the atoms, the geometry of the ship cannot survive. But the destruction of form does not equal the deletion of information.
The SVE remembers the stress. The black hole destructures the matter, but the exact boundary conditions of that matter, the precise way it pushed against the SVE, are encoded as a resonance signature.
Permanently vibrating in the field.
Exactly. The degrees of freedom of the matter are translated perfectly into the phase structure of the field tension.
And this completely reframes what Hawking radiation actually is. In the classical view, Hawking radiation is explained as virtual particle-antiparticle pairs randomly popping out of the quantum vacuum right at the edge of the event horizon.
One falls in, one escapes, slowly bleeding the black hole's mass.
Which, let's be honest, has always sounded a bit like mathematical magic.
It is a mathematical idealization used to bridge relativity and quantum field theory. But in UED, this radiation is not spontaneous, random particle creation.
Chavan calls it signature leakage, or field fatigue.
The black hole is a zone of immense, aggressively misaligned ripple tension. The SVE has a massive amount of stress localized in one area.
Eventually, just like a pressure valve, the field can no longer hold that concentrated stress.
It has to slowly discharge the tension to avoid catastrophic incoherence.
So the field is physically exhaling its stress. It's letting go of the localized pressure by radiating ripples outward.
But here is the multi-million-dollar question. Why did legacy physics think this radiation was completely random, thereby assuming the information was lost?
Because the classical physics was measuring the wrong metric. They were looking for the amplitude of particles.
Right. When you only measure the raw amplitude of a tension release, it looks like thermal noise. It looks like random heat.
But UED argues that if you have the perceptual capacity to measure the ripple topology, the deep field resonance, and the phase structure of the SVE, you would see that this radiation is highly structured.
It is carrying the exact encoded signature of the original tension that fell into the black hole.
Chavan uses this brilliant analogy of a ringing bell. Imagine taking a perfectly tuned brass bell and dropping it into the extreme tension zone of the SVE.
Okay, so the sheer gravitational compression crushes the bell. The physical shape, the brass, the curve, the handle, completely dissolves into raw field stress.
The form is dead. But the bell's tone, the precise vibratory signature of its atomic structure, becomes encoded into the tension of the SVE.
The bell is everywhere. It just isn't shaped like a bell anymore.
The information has undergone a non-local holographic spread of consequence across the SVE. It is no longer localized in a physical object. It is distributed as a harmonic memory within the field.
Think about a heavily corrupted, zipped computer file.
Oh, that's a good one.
The data isn't gone from the hard drive. It hasn't vanished into a void. It's just scrambled in a syntax we currently lack the software to read.
Black holes don't delete the universe's hard drive. They just zip the file in a high-tension format.
The information paradox dies not because we invented a mathematical firewall, but because we realized the data is literally woven into the physical tension of the SVE.
Nothing is ever lost. It is only ever misaligned.
It is a profoundly elegant resolution. But, and this is a big but, if the black hole isn't a cosmic trash compactor destroying information, but rather a vault preserving it through tension.
It begs a massive question about the other side of the cosmic timeline, doesn't it?
Exactly. If nothing is ever truly destroyed, only destructured into field memory, how was it created in the first place?
You can't have a universe of precise, preserved tension if it all started from a chaotic, featureless explosion.
Which brings us to Act 4, the breath versus the bang. Let's talk about the origin of the universe.
The Big Bang is the foundational narrative of modern cosmology. The Standard Model dictates that, approximately 13.8 billion years ago, the universe began as a singularity.
Another infinity.
Right, a point of infinite density that violently exploded outward, creating space, time, and all matter in a rapid period of cosmic inflation.
It's dramatic. But Chavan dismantles it completely. He replaces the chaotic bang with a concept he calls the first breath.
The first breath. To understand this physically, we have to look at the initial conditions of the SVE.
In UED, the universe did not begin as an empty nothingness waiting to be filled by an explosion. The SVE is pre-existing.
It is a fundamental, perfectly balanced, highly structured field of potential.
The origin of our observable universe was not a violent outward blast from a tiny point. It was the initial divergence from perfect field equilibrium.
It wasn't a stick of dynamite going off. It was a shift in tension.
Picture a perfectly calm lake, absolute glass, not a single ripple.
The first breath wasn't an explosion in the water. It was an initial hum, a subtle shift in the baseline energy of the field,
causing the very first ripples to form and diverge simultaneously across the medium.
And this transition from an explosion model to a divergence model has massive implications for the biggest observational crisis in astronomy right now, which is the expansion of space.
Cosmology tells us that space itself is expanding, like the rubber of a balloon stretching out.
The primary proof for this is redshift. When we look at distant galaxies, the wavelength of their light is stretched out toward the red end of the spectrum.
The further away they are, the more stretched the light is. Classical physics interprets this stretching as the physical fabric of space, pulling the galaxies away from us at accelerating speeds.
But UED explicitly states that the expansion of space is a myth.
Precisely, because space isn't a physical container that can stretch. Space is a property of the SVE, and the SVE is a continuous, unbroken field.
So what is actually expanding? In UED, it is the ripple horizon, our ability to interpret the divergence of ripples.
Okay, we need to really explain the mechanism here. How does a delay in alignment physically stretch the wavelength of light without space itself stretching?
It goes back to ATT, alignment threshold time.
As ripples propagate through the SVE over vast distances, they encounter increasing field complexity and interference. The tension gradient becomes highly complex.
Because of this, the ATT, the time it takes for those ancient ripples to successfully align with our telescopes, increases.
The interval between the ripple crests takes longer and longer to synchronize with our perceptual machinery.
And this delay in the phase locking process is observed by our instruments as a stretched wavelength.
So the light isn't physically stretching as it travels through empty space.
Right.
The redshift is just delayed realignment.
The signal is taking longer to sync up with us because the field's tension is increasingly complex to navigate.
The universe isn't physically growing like a balloon. Our ripple horizon is just deepening.
The galaxies aren't actually running away from us. The delay in aligning with them is simply increasing.
Exactly. And if you understand that ATT governs spatial perception, it unlocks the most mind-bending concept in all of UED, the redefinition of time.
Oh, this is my favorite part. In the Big Bang model, time is a coordinate. It started at t equals 0. Before the bang, there was no time.
Right. Hawking called it the no-boundary proposal. Asking what happened before the Big Bang was like asking what is north of the North Pole. Time just curved back on itself.
But UED argues that time is not an axis. Time did not start. Time awakened as a consequence of noticing ripple delay.
Let's go back to the perfectly calm lake. If the SVE is in perfect unbroken equilibrium, there are no ripples.
If there are no ripples, there is no ATT. There is no delay to process because there is nothing to align with.
Therefore, in a state of perfect balance, time literally does not exist.
Time only exists when there is a misalignment that takes effort to resolve. The universe doesn't have a master ticking clock hidden in the background.
It only has cause and consequence in the field.
The ticking clock is just us, the observers, experiencing the mechanical friction of ATT. Time is just the sensation of waiting for reality to align.
Time is a symptom of your interaction with the field. When the first breath occurred, the perfect stillness of the SVE broke. Divergence happened.
And because there was now a difference between the states of tension in the field, it required a delay for those states to synchronize and interact.
That delay is what our biological and macroscopic systems process as the linear flow of time.
Let me push back on this just a bit, because if we follow this logic to its extreme, it leads to a pretty wild conclusion about human experience.
Okay, let's hear it.
If time only exists when there is a delay in perception, if time is just the friction of ATT, does that mean if you perfectly align with the SVE, time physically stops for you?
Think about the quantum level, where particles can become entangled and react instantaneously.
Right. Or even on a human scale when athletes enter the zone. Or in deep meditative flow states where hours pass in what feels like seconds. Are they literally reducing their ATT?
From the perspective of field logic, yes. That is a completely consistent interpretation. Time dilates or compresses based on your state of coherence with the field.
When your internal biological and mental field is highly turbulent and misaligned with the external SVE, the ATT is high.
The delay is long, time drags.
But when your internal field achieves high resonance with the surrounding SVE, the alignment delay drops exponentially. You minimize the perceptual friction of reality.
Time becomes irrelevant because you are operating closer to the field's baseline state of equilibrium.
That is genuinely profound. We aren't stepping outside of time. We are just optimizing our alignment with the universe.
But if the universe didn't explode out of nowhere and instead breathed into this highly structured, responsive SVE where every single ripple interacts with perfect, preserving logic.
What governs these rules? If it's not just random chaos, who or what is orchestrating the syntax of the SVE?
This question is unavoidable when you look at the sheer elegance of field dynamics. And it brings us to Act 5, Supreme Intelligence and the Intelligible Universe.
This is where Chavan directly addresses the philosophical underpinning of legacy physics, specifically Hawking's mathematical atheism.
Hawking famously wrote in A Brief History of Time that we don't need a creator to light the blue touch paper and set the universe going.
He argued that because there is a law like gravity, the universe can and will create itself from nothing. The laws of mathematics are sufficient to bring reality into existence.
And we need to be extremely clear here. When Chavan introduces the concept of supreme intelligence, he is completely agreeing with Hawking that we do not need a mythological anthropomorphic creator.
UED is not a Trojan horse for religious creationism. Supreme intelligence is emphatically not a deity sitting outside the universe making choices.
There is no bearded man on a cloud throwing lightning bolts or fine-tuning the constants of gravity.
So if it's not a sentient creator, what exactly is the supreme intelligence in UEDA?
It is the built-in coherence logic of the SVE itself. It is what Chavan calls the unseen grammar of consequence.
Think about the most basic observations of physics. Why does the SVE always seek equilibrium?
Why do ripples follow highly predictable geometric patterns of interference instead of just acting with pure randomness?
Why does a black hole preserve information as phase structure rather than just deleting it? The universe fundamentally insists on making sense.
Hawking looked at that incredible symmetry, the conservation of energy, the laws of thermodynamics, and essentially said, look, math does this. Math is the reason it works.
But Chavan is pointing out a massive epistemological flaw in that reasoning. Math doesn't cause anything.
Exactly. Equations are descriptive, not prescriptive. They do not have causal power.
The equation for a perfect circle does not reach into the physical world and draw a circle. It simply describes the logical conditions of circularity.
Math is our syntax. It is the human language we use to measure the echo of the field's behavior. But supreme intelligence is the underlying structural logic of the SVE that makes the syntax work in the first place.
Think about the mechanics of electricity. Voltage doesn't decide where to go. The electrons don't have little brains calculating their route.
But electricity always perfectly follows the intelligence structure of the gradient. It takes the path of least resistance with absolute mathematical precision.
The intelligence isn't an external force driving the electricity. The intelligence is built into the gradient itself.
That is exactly what supreme intelligence is in UED. Hawking noticed the unbelievable elegance of the cosmos, but he attributed causal power to the equations themselves.
As if the math was the engine driving the car.
It's like Hawking mistook the map for the territory. He saw a beautiful blueprint and assumed the blueprint built the house.
But Chavan is stepping in and saying, no, there has to be an underlying physical logic to the bricks themselves.
The SVE has an innate grammar that insists on coherence. It literally does not allow for pure chaos.
Which is why the information paradox is resolved the way it is. The supreme intelligence of the SVE demands consequence. Every action must have an equal and opposite reaction.
Every physical ripple must leave an encoded signature. It is a universe of profound structural integrity that governs itself through field logic.
This shift in perspective is just staggering. We've journeyed from an empty, cold universe defined by bent space, mathematically doomed black holes, and an explosive, chaotic origin,
to a living, responsive SVE, a field where nothing is ever lost, only misaligned.
Where a built-in grammar of consequence ensures that every single action eventually resolves. Which leads us to the ultimate question, doesn't it?
If the universe is a structured field of tension waiting to be perceived, where do we fit into it?
Where does the conscious observer belong in a universe made entirely of ripples?
This brings us to our closing reflection, the final radiation. And ironically, to find our place in Chavan's framework, we can look back to a profoundly human sentiment expressed by Stephen Hawking at the end of his life.
Hawking once said that a universe would be empty and meaningless if it weren't home to the people you love.
It was a beautiful, poetic way of finding warmth in a cosmos that he largely viewed as mathematically indifferent.
But in UED Nest, Chavan takes that poetic sentiment and grounds it in actual hard physics.
In classical physics, the observer is an accident. We are a random arrangement of atoms, a byproduct of chemical evolution on a tiny rock, passively watching the universe happen to us.
But in UED, the observer is a fundamental mechanism of reality. The observer is the spark that makes the void visible.
Because without an observer to experience ATT, without a localized receiver to interact with the ripples and experience the delay of realignment, there is no light.
There is no time. There is no boundary.
The massive tension of the SVE only crystallizes into a measurable, recognizable reality when a localized field of awareness interacts with it.
Light wasn't the first thing in the universe. The ripple was. The baseline tension was there.
But light, as we experience it, time as we feel it flowing, only exists because you are there to phase lock with that ripple.
You, the observer, are the final radiation of the universe. The universe doesn't passively shine down on you. It actively resonates through you.
It fundamentally changes what it means to be alive. You are not a passive audience member. You are an active participant in the supreme intelligence of the field.
Before we sign off, I want to remind everyone that if you want to explore the dense mechanics and the full mathematical arguments behind everything we discussed today, Sandeep J. Chavan's profound books, including Chavan versus Hawking and Chavan versus Einstein, are available worldwide on platforms like Books to Read.
If you want to bridge the gap between legacy physics and field logic, they are absolutely essential reading.
It has been a genuinely rigorous and revelatory journey unpacking this framework with you, moving from the limitations of continuous geometry to the sheer, unbroken potential of field tension.
It really has. We've completely dismantled the physical walls of the universe and replaced them with the mechanics of perception.
But as we close, I want to leave you, the listener, with one final, completely new thought to mull over. A corollary of everything we've explored today regarding ATT and the SVE.
Oh, this ought to be good.
We established that time and physical distance are just symptoms of perceptual delay, friction in the field. And we discussed how achieving personal resonance lowers that delay.
Right.
But what if we expand that? If our consciousness is just a localized field of awareness actively aligning with the SVV, what happens when two distinct observers perfectly align not just with the background field, but with each other?
Oh, wow.
If time and distance disappear in a state of perfect resonance, could profound human connection, the kind of empathy that makes you feel what someone else is feeling across the world, actually be a literal, localized manipulation of quantum physics?
Like an overlapping of frequencies.
Exactly. Could love simply be a synchronized ATT?
Yeah.
A shared resonance that temporarily overrides the physics of isolation? Think about what kind of ripples you're sending into the SVE today.
That is a beautiful thought to leave on.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Stay curious, keep aligning, and we'll see you next time.